All right, here in After Effects 2022, what I want to do is explain comps and compositions and pre-composing. So what we have here, I have this little animation of a logo, kind of logo coming in together, and then the word mark, and then a little bit of track matting to kind of bring the word super and service together. That's all. Has a bit of a background and has a little bit of a fade out at the end there too. Let's see how that works. Okay. What I want to have kind of happen here is what almost a potential what could happen, and we could have layers and layers and layers and many layers going on, and you can get stacks and stacks of layers. And the thing we have to know is that we can't group layers in After Effects like we can in Photoshop or Illustrator, but what we can do is pre-compose. And by pre-composing, what we're doing is we're selecting a bunch of layers or even just one layer and making it its own composition. And within that composition, you can do whatever you want to it. It's still within this project. You could have so many compositions within one project, and that's actually going to help you organize yourself much better. Also, you can put compositions within compositions within compositions. You could have so many. So let's actually look at that. So right now I have a few things going on. So let's look. I have a couple background ideas. I have this black background, a solid black background, cool, and I added a little bit of a texture to it. So I have this texture on it as well. Let me zoom in a little bit. Then I also have my setup file, which I don't really need, so it's kind of shut off. But I also have my service, where this actually comes in and provides me with the word service comes in and the word super comes in. So there's my service and there's my super with my alpha mats on top of those, the track mats. And I have the two S1 and S2. So this is S1 and this is S2. And I have a little fade out, which is kind of not really, functional at the moment, which doesn't really matter. Either way. What I want to show is I can actually kind of almost like group these layers and or work on them separately, similar to a situation in Photoshop where we have grouped layers or a smart object. Now, what does a smart object do in Photoshop? Well, it allows us to have one layer, but inside that layer you have many objects inside that other layer that opens up into a new Photoshop document. Well, it's kind of similar to that. And it's also very similar to in Illustrator when we have an isolation mode. When you double click on any object in Illustrator, what happens, it takes you into isolation mode, everything else gets grayed out, and you're only allowed to work on that one thing that you double clicked. Well, this is all very similar to that, compositions. So what I'm going to do, let me just take these, these four animations, or these two animations I really have here, the super and the service. I'm just going to take those ones. So this is the animation for super, it has its alpha mat, and this is the animation for service. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to compose those. I'm going to make them their own composition, and I'm going to work on them separately from everything else. So what I'm going to do, there's a couple of ways to do this. I could select them all, and I could right click and go to pre-compose right over here, or I can go up to layer and pre-compose here, or obviously use the keyboard shortcut of Shift Command C. I'm on a Mac, so potentially that's Shift Control C on a PC. So I'm going to pre-compose, and now it gives me a couple options. Number one, should I name it? Of course, I'm going to call this one the word mark, because I'm working on the word mark for this particular logo. Now it only gives me one option: move all the attributes into new composition. Use this option to place the currently selected layers together into a new intermediate composition. Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Adjust composition duration to the time span of the selected layers. You know what? It's going to be the same time, so yes, I'm going to leave that alone, but really, from 0, it's going to be the exact same amount of time and the exact same dimensions of this particular composition, which happens to be 1080 by 1080. Open new composition? Not yet. I'm just going to save it and have it made. Okay, there it is. Now, yeah, we do see that 4 layers disappeared and only one composition is there now. Well, this composition, we could tell it's a composition because it's icon that it has. It's named word mark, exactly what I named it. And if I go into my comps panel now, there's a new composition called word mark. Great. Now everything is still there. Nothing changed. My animation is still exactly the same. There's my super and there's my service. That's great. So let's go into word mark and take a look at what it does. Now notice something, what happens when I double click on this. This right here is my main composition that I have everything in. And then I have my render queue, which I can close. I could always bring it back. So you know what, for now I'm going to close it. What's going to happen is another composition is going to show up here, my word mark composition. So I can go back and forth and work on them as I want. So here I'm going to double click, and there I go. here is the new composition, the word mark composition. And look, my layers are back. Super alpha, that was the alpha channel for super, and the alpha channel for surface. So these are exact same layers I had in here, but now they're just inside this composition. That's great. So let me take a look at it again. Yeah, I'm going to play through, nothing happens. That's right, the animation starts here. Perfect. So everything stayed the same, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. So now in this situation, so let me kind of get a little bit more detailed here. Maybe I want to work on this very specifically in this composition. Maybe there's something else I want to do. Well, let's try it out. Let's add a adjustment layer. Maybe I'm going to add an adjustment layer up here, layer, new, adjustment, and I only want the adjustment to affect these layers. That's why I brought it into its own composition. Let's just pretend. So what I'm going to do, I'll probably go to a color correction, and maybe I'll add a particular hue saturation. So let's just try that out. So I'm going to click on that, drag it in. All right, there's my effect. So what I want to do with this hue saturation animation, I see there's only one way to animate it is with this stopwatch here for color range. So what I'll do right now is looking fine. So what I'll do at this point, maybe I'll have it black and white, and then it'll slowly change color. So what I can do is I'm going to click on this channel range here. Okay. And at this point, at this keyframe, I want it to be 0 saturation. So what it'll be just black and white. Okay. So it's going to start off black and white, and then as I move it up and as it starts to come in, what I'll do at this point, potentially maybe a little further, I'm going to start bringing in the colors. So I'm going to now bring up my color to 0, which is that normal saturation, and that's it. So now it's just going to have this animation from black and white to my normal saturation, and that's it. Now, here's the great thing. Whatever happens in this composition, I don't have to save it. I can save my project, just, file save. I don't actually have to save my composition for these changes to take effect in my main composition. That's all I have to do. Click on my main composition, and that's it. You'll see that the logo will now change from a no saturation to a saturated or normal saturation. And there it is. So whatever happens in this composition, once that composition was in here, which it already was, it changes. No matter what I do here will happen in my other composition. Great. Well, let's go one step further. Let's try something else out. What if I pre-composed within this composition already? I'm just going to play around with the word service and that little animation there. So let's pre-compose this. So I'm going to take these two layers that belong together for this particular animation, the track mat and the word service, and I'm going to pre-compose. Right click, pre-compose. Okay, what do I want to call this one? Well, I want to call this one service word mark, because that's specific to that. Yeah, move all the attributes, good stuff. Okay, so now what do I have here? I have this adjustment layer affecting all of this, but inside this service one, just for the word service, let's double click and see what I could do with it. So I'm going to double click on it. Now another one shows up, service word mark. Okay, so what do I have in there? Yes, my service track mat and my service word. Perfect. And it's still the exact same animation, same amount of time, same dimension and composition. Perfect. And that's all it's showing me is that one animation. Well, what can I do here with this? You know what? Let's add another adjustment layer. New, layer and new, yeah, adjustment layer. And at the top, I don't want to mess that up, is I'm going to add a blur to it. So let's just add some kind of blur. Potential, I'll add a Gaussian blur, blur and sharpen, and Gaussian blur. And I'm just going to click and drag onto that. It shows up in my effects panel. So what I can do now is here, when it's ready to come in, I'm going to bring this down so I could see, or just click on you and get my animation there, my keyframe, which was the position keyframe. I see it right there. Okay, so it's slowly starting to come in. Okay, there it is. So what I want to do here is I want to add a blur to it. So I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to go to my effects, my Gaussian blur, and my blurriness at this point will be, I'm going to set my stopwatch, get my keyframe there. My blurriness is going to be pretty blurry. Now I can't see it obviously, but I can judge it later on. I'm going to bring it up. So right now it's very blurry, and I'm just going to say at some point, maybe midway, maybe a little bit less, I'm going to bring that back down to 0. Okay, cool. So now it's going to go from a blurriness to a not blurriness. Let's extend that out a little bit further. So it's more than halfway. So it's going to be blurry and then it's not going to be blurry. Okay, so there I made this specific animation inside this composition, and it's going to affect it in this composition, and it's going to change in this composition as well. So I'm actually going to bring that back a little bit, and what I'll do is I'm actually going to increase that blur even more. Let's get it up to 30 and see what that looks like, just to show you this is really being affected. There we go, that's really blurry. Okay, great. Once again, I don't have to save this, but you know what, I'm going to save the project. So Command S, I save the project. So I go back to this word mark, and what do I see? I see, yeah, it's blurry, that's right, and then it comes in. If I go back to the main composition, yeah, it's blurry, and then it comes in again. So a comp within a comp within a comp really works out. This is great. So I can actually control very specific things I want within a composition that doesn't affect the overall main composition, which becomes very, very helpful. So this is one way we can really organize ourselves, because there will be some projects you'll have many, many layers, and to help you organize yourself is pre-compose those. Now another way to look at this is because you could have many, many comps within each other. So this, I just have kind of 3 levels of comps, really not too crazy. I can kind of control myself there. I see it's like, okay, I have my main comp, then within that there's a word mark. Well, there's a word mark comp, and I see the things that are in there, great. And then I have my other comp here, service, and there it is. And whatever's in here, this is my other, composition, something happening here. Well, I can kind of get a little overwhelmed with how many compositions I have and kind of keep track of it. Well, there's one way we can kind of control that, and it helps with actually this great feature in After Effects. It's called a flowchart. Now right now there's a mini flowchart in kind of our layers panel. This is the mini flowchart. Well, composition mini flowchart, let's open it up and see what it does. It's a very small flowchart. Okay, well, what's it show me? It shows me service word mark. Yeah, that's right. And that service word mark is inside of word mark. Yeah, that's right. And if I continue on, it shows me even more. It shows me super service. That's right. That's the flow of it. It goes service word mark to word mark to super service logo. Perfect. That's exactly what it is. This composition is in this composition. This composition is inside this composition. So that really helps me out in seeing that. So with the mini flowchart, I could see kind of everything there, but there's another way to do this where I could actually click on composition. I have this composition open, and I can click on composition flowchart. And here's what it shows me. This is the super service logo comp. I'm going to press the plus sign, and it shows me everything available to me in what is actually happening here. Now, there are a couple different ways that I could play around with this. Number one, I could show the footage if I want to show the footage. I don't have to show the footage. All the different things that make up the actual composition. I can see the different solids, all the different solids that make it up or not. I could shut those off. I could show all the individual different layers if I want to show all the layers, but maybe I don't want to. Maybe I just want to keep it really simplified. Or I could show all the different effects if I want to see all the different effects that are being affected by it. In this one, I could actually toggle between, like I said, straight and curved lines if that's just easier for me to see. And then the flow direction. So this one's actually really beneficial because some of you might be more familiar seeing things left to right or top to bottom, whatever. So I'm just going to click on that. It says top to bottom, bottom to top, left to right, right to left. So I'm just going to go left to right and see what that does. Okay, that's that way. I actually want to show it the other way, right to left. Okay, so this is actually, I like this. So this is my super service logo. It shows me everything that's inside there. Well, what's inside here? Okay, so I have all my different layers. What I have is I could click on this plus sign and it goes away, or click on it, it shows me everything that's going on in that. Well, there's another plus sign here. Yeah, word mark, because remember that word mark is inside, that composition is inside the super service. Let's click on the plus sign. Oh, okay, it shows me everything else that's available inside of that composition. Well, what else is inside that composition? We know there's another service word mark that's inside there as well. Okay, let's actually get rid of some of these things. I just want to see the compositions. So that's it. These show me everything that's kind of just the compositions that are inside of each other. Now, if I want to see a little bit more, let me show the footage. Okay, this is the footage. These are the graphics I have in there, the background, all that stuff. Okay, great. This is just the solids, which in these ones I don't really have solids. I think in the first one I have a solid, but it's not showing it to me. That's all right. I have that black solid there, but for some reason not showing it. That's okay. And then I have all my layers in general, all the layers I could see if I wanted to show them. And then I also have different effects. So there are ways, especially if you have a lot of footage, a lot of compositions, a lot going on, you could actually very pinpoint exactly what you want using this flowchart method, which is really good. You have the simple flowchart here, or you have the larger flowchart here as well. So this is just showing you different ways to organize yourself in After Effects, different ways to see it, especially if you get a little too far and you have many compositions. This will really help guide you in understanding how the compositions work and how it all came together. Now, still working with this, what I can also do is, you might want to, I don't want to see this flowchart anymore, or whatever the case is. You could just go back here, go back to your main composition in this viewport, and you're back to your composition, which is fine. If you want to go back to the flowchart, you can. If you want to close it, you can close it. Go back to it, composition flowchart, and it brings you back to that main composition. I could move it around. I could kind of do whatever I want, because you might have a lot to see. So it's going to be nice to see where this goes. Now, the thing I could do, I will close this for now, which I don't really need to see it anymore or whatever. I could always get back to it. The other thing I can do is, let's take a look at this. I'm going to take this background and I'm going to pre-compose it. I'm going to pre-compose this background because what I want to do, I want to animate it. Now this time it says leave all attributes in Super Service logo. So leave everything in here. Use this option to create a new intermediate composition with only the background in it. That's it, nothing else. This new composition will become the source of the current layer, so only the image more or less. But you know what? I like to move everything with it for this particular one, so I'll just say okay. SS background AI comp 1. Now it names it that because it's only one composition. If I have one layer. If I have multiple layers selected, it won't know what to name it. So I'm just going to leave it as SS background, and that's fine. I'm actually happy with the way it's labeled. And what I'll do is I'll just double click on that. Now what I could do is actually something interesting here is that all the compositions that are within compositions actually don't need to be the same comp size in terms of their dimensions. So let me actually just play around with this. I'm going to go to composition settings and I'm actually going to make this 1920. So let's make this 1920, still 1080. Definitely still want to keep my frame rate the same, and even my time can change, but I'm going to keep it the same. But I can change my time, so I can change my dimensions. I can change the time. But for now, I'm just going to keep it as is for definitely my frame rate. I'm going to keep that because that could really mess up your other animation when things come together. If you have a 30 frame rate or 60 frame rate and you bring them together, that could really mess around with some keyframe changes. So that's all I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to have like this kind of animation where the layer, which I'm going to put a new solid so I can see what's going on. Let me add that layer, new, solid, and I'm just going to make it the same as the comp, say okay. And what I'll do with that is I'm going to do something here where I'm just going to right click on that and I just want to make it a guide layer. I don't actually want it to show up in my composition, so let's actually see if that happens. So I'm going to click on this. This is a guide layer, so the black part shouldn't show up in my composition, my main composition. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to shut off my black comp and say perfect. Okay, so the main composite, my main black solid is still there, but the other black one did not show up, but my background is still there. So good. So that's a guide layer. It really helps us out. So that's all I'm going to do, something very simple. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to do a little position transformation very slowly, and I'm just going to bring this here and I'm going to just slowly animate it across. So at this point I'm going to animate it. I'm going to click on the position and I'm just going to bring it all the way to the end, and I'm going to animate it here and say I want this to move slowly this way, and that's it. Now I'm doing it here because this is roughly the 1080. I could always go back and adjust it, and that's it. That's my main animation, very simple. So what's going to happen in my main composition is I go back to it. Remember, I don't got to save anything. I'm good to go. Just go back here. Is that it will move. So my main composition is that. Now I see there's a bit of an issue here, which is okay. So that's kind of all that's happening. It's just going to move. I'm looking at it. I'm seeing, okay, what's happening here? Does it make it to the end? Perfect. And it's just looping itself now, which is okay. So let me go back to it right there and let me fix it. It's going a little too far. So let me go there, bring it back here. Still not enough. I'm still haven't brought it back enough. So let me go back and bring it over even more. Oh, I see what happened there. I didn't do it at the actual keyframe, which I should have. There you go. I'm going to bring it over a little bit. Okay, that's it. Now let's see. Yeah, it corrected itself. Perfect. Now I go through and I see this kind of cool pattern in the background. You know what? It's a little overwhelming just for this situation. So what I'll do is I'm just going to lower the opacity of that. I could lower the opacity of the comp. So I click open my comp and I see what I can do. I could actually lower the opacity. I could transform it. I could scale it. I could do all the normal things, but with just one comp, which is great. So I'm just going to lower that opacity. I'm not going to actually animate it. I just want to lower it down, which I did. Okay, that's great. Now another cool thing with this, as we should know just by looking at this, so I pre-compose these, which is great, but I could also actually pre-compose something and then bring it in again and again and again into the same composition. So let's do that. I'm going to pre-compose the S1 and S2. So that was this little animation here. So I'm just going to pre-compose, select both, pre-compose, and now I have, I'm just going to call this this is the icon for the logo. So I'm just going to say okay. So it's pre-composed. There it is. So I'm just going to see in my project panel. Let's see where it is. There it is, the icon, and watch what I can do. I could actually do it here. I could duplicate it, get the icon to duplicate, and now those two layers are just duplicated inside this composition, and now I can move it around. Maybe I just move that part right over there. Okay, there's another one, and I could also scale it down for some reason, which is fine. I could grab it from here, from the project panel, and bring it in. And it shows up here. That's cool. I'll bring it down here for some reason. And now this is a way to maybe create some interesting animations. And instead of doing it all in one layer, I could pre-compose it, and I could just keep on bringing them up and watch the animation here. It's just going to kind of show up, and they're all going to happen all at once. Now we obviously saw the way that worked out because the way they came in, but that's kind of it. And we could really play around with those and have some fun with those. So there's many different ways to play around with our compositions now to bring multiple in if we want to, whatever we want to do, which I'm obviously going to delete those because that's a little too much. But instead of just pre-composing, we could actually bring more compositions in, duplicating that one animation over and over and over inside of a main comp or other comps realistically. So I hope that helps understand compositions and get you a little bit more further understanding organization inside After Effects. Now another thing I can do here as well in After Effects is, now we're very aware that compositions only pertain to one specific project. I can't open up multiple projects and play around with comp. So if I wanted to just take this comp and copy it, I can't just bring it into another project. But it's like, you know what? I did something pretty cool here. I like it. I like this, you know, let's pretend I like this kind of icon comp and I want to bring it into another project and do something else with it. Well, there's a way to do that, which is great. There's a couple different ways to do that. So what I can do is I'm going to collect all this compositions, save it in a separate folder, and then I'm going to bring it into another project. So let's actually try that out. So right now I see that I have all these different comps here. Let's take a look at this. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Dependencies and Collect Files. So I'm going to click on, I need to save it first, not a problem. And it's going to ask me, okay, what do you want to actually collect here? So, well, I want to collect all the comps, or if I actually had only one comp I wanted, I would select it here in my project panel and say only selected comps, but I want for all the comps. I'm going to reduce the project, but what it's going to do, it's actually going to bring in everything that belongs to that comp. Well, it's going to belong to all these comps. So I'm just going to say collect. Where do I want to save it? I'll save it on my desktop for now. Save, great. And it shows up. Now this is actually on my desktop. There it is. So it's a separate AEP, but look at inside the footage, inside of this footage folder, graphics, AI, and there's all my linked files that I need for these comps. Great. I'm just going to put this down here for now. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to close this because I want to show that this could open up in a separate project. So I'm going to File, I'm going to close this project. I'm going to open up a new composition. Let's do 1080 because I know that's the size of this other one here. 24 frames per second, doesn't matter at the time. Say okay. Great. Now what I could do, I'm going to go to File, Import File, and I'm actually going to bring in what I just had there, desktop, and I'm going to find it, my SS folder. There it is. And there it is. My footage, all that stuff. I'm just going to bring in the AEP. I'm going to say open up the AEP and look what it brings in. It brings in all my comps, all my graphics, all my solids. So I'm actually able to bring in, so let's actually bring in the icon onto my layer. Let's see if it works. Yeah, there it is. Let's bring in the super and the super service logo, the word mark. Let's bring in the word mark. Yeah, there it is, and it brought in the comps. Remember, it was a little bit blurry and all that. Went and changed up our added adjustment layer of the unsaturated to saturated. So it brought in everything. So now I can play around with these comps that I made in another project in this same project. So you could open up an AEP file and import it into any other project you have, which is really, really great. So that's another way to play with compositions, or really help us play around in After Effects.